So the American Conservative Union is putting on their Conservative Political Action Conference, also known as CPAC, this weekend. And I think we're seeing some interesting developments coming out of there. CPAC is an interesting barometer of sort of where the Republican Party is at. You may recall that CPAC was started back in the 70s during the Ford administration as sort of a gathering of Reagan-supporting Republicans. And the purpose was pretty clear. It was sort of a way of rallying the people who would make up the campaign, you know, the newspaper columnists, the activists, all those sorts. It was a way of getting them together and getting them to get them rallied up for the 1980 campaign, in which Reagan ultimately won quite decisively. Since then, however, CPAC's kind of become an annual gathering of people who are, you know, sort of, I guess, more wonky politicians who have greater ambitions in the future, and also conservative media types to get together and try and excite each other about their rather boring and milquetoast ideas. Now, historically, I think that since the end of the Reagan administration, CPAC has been sort of a platform for grifters to come forward and audition for a position in Conservatism Incorporated. Usually you'd be asked to speak at CPAC if you've made somewhat of a name for yourself in the conservative industrial complex. And once you've spoken at CPAC, that's sort of your chance to really make yourself more mainstream amongst everyone and get your name out there. You can make a lot of good contacts and get better jobs. So because of this, as a normal voter, CPAC's never been that interesting to me, since it is purely a sort of a marketing event or a networking event. But it is quite funny watching this year, now that we're in the Trump era. CPAC has sort of finally moved away from being a Reagan talking points event, and now we're more on to Trump talking points. It's quite interesting seeing the sort of the formula changed up like that, because now you have more of an opportunity for folks like, you know, Seb Gorka, who would have had really no place at CPAC until a couple years ago, now being invited as one of the star guests. Now, is this necessarily because the American Conservative Union has changed in its ideology radically over the last few years? No, not at all. It's just that Matt Schlapp and his organization are a bunch of grifters, and that's why they put on the CPAC event. It's about making money. So for them, they want to make sure that they have people speaking at their event who represent views that are sort of in vogue at the time. So I don't care if the Republican Party turned into a party of moderate communists tomorrow. The ACU would certainly follow. Now, with all that said, is there anyone who really watches or attends CPAC and earnestly gets excited by sort of this conga line of clowns regurgitating Republican talking points? I would say probably not. I think that there are people who go to CPAC and are genuinely excited, but it's not necessarily because they're excited by the intellectual stimulation. I think they're excited by, one, going to an event with other people who they have things in common with, and two, going to an event in which they have a chance to really do some good networking, even if they're not a speaker, and try and get a good job in the conservative industrial complex. You see, there's always a lot of college students that attend CPAC, and the reason for that is because they need jobs. Okay, if you're in college, you're working towards getting a job. So going to CPAC is kind of like it's kind of like a job fair. You get a job at you can meet lobbyists and PAC directors and all sorts of folks. Campaign directors looking for talented young staffers who are passionate about their trade. But CPAC is far from an intellectual gathering. There are a few things I can think of that are less esoteric than a typical CPAC speech. Now, CPAC has invited some interesting, well-thought-out people like Eugene Genovese in the past. However, their average guest is more of a red meat type. And that's why I say, to use a sort of a financial analogy, the conservative movement is a movement full of technicians, but nobody who focuses on fundamentals. I.e., you get a lot of folks talking about how we can win on, you know, immigration, or how we can lower taxes, or, you know, they all have their one little pet issue they all happen to attend these same groups, but there's no real theory behind why any of those people should be aligned with one another, or why, say, restricted immigration has anything to do with lowering taxes. Why should someone necessarily favor both those things? Why can't they favor just one of them? There's no reason for the conservative movement to be bound together other than pragmatism. They don't really have an ideology. So because of that, I, as someone who kind of likes to think, with my brain and read books and stuff, I find them very boring and uninteresting, because never in my life have I ever heard anyone make any sort of coherent argument as to what the American conservative movement stands for, or what its essence is. All I get are platitudes about how, we love America and stuff. It's like, okay, everybody loves their country. So that's why I think Michael Malice is right when he says that conservatism is just progressivism driving the speed limit. Because if you look at the things being touted by folks at ACU, it's things that would have been perfectly mainstream in the Democrat Party about 20 or 30 years ago. I mean, think about how quickly the conservatives just dropped, the whole gay marriage thing. Well, now that's gone, so I guess gay marriage has been around long enough to where now it can be accepted as a fundamental conservative principle. I think there are still some people there pushing the war on drugs, but I think after the next Democrat administration, you won't see Republicans pushing the war on drugs anymore, and now by then drug legalization will have been a fundamental conservative principle too. So as I record this, the grifters at CPAC drone on about their supposed principles and all of their very important ideological goals, all the while their audience laps it up and claps for them like seals out of sheer apathy or ignorance, one of the two. However, one gem that stood out to me was Michelle Malkin. Michelle Malkin's speech was very passionate against increased immigration. I do believe that she is kind of earnest in her dislike for immigration, much like Ann Coulter. I used to think Ann Coulter was a grifter too, like Sean Hannity, but I think Malkin and Coulter are actually very genuine people. And Malkin, in her speech, evoked the ghost of John McCain in what is considered to be a rather tasteless gesture, but something that I found quite amusing. She essentially said that we shouldn't let the ghost of John McCain dictate our immigration policies, i.e., we should restrict immigration a little further and be tougher on the border and, kick the illegals out, Operation Wetback, that sort of stuff. And I'm sure that while the sentiment people probably agreed with, I'm sure there was a lot of pearl clutching in the audience, especially amongst the boomers, because we all know you're not supposed to question John McCain, especially now that he's dead. Folks are always lionized after they're dead. But anyway, Trump's supposed to speak there today, and if anything interesting happens there, I'll make another video about it. But for now, I don't think that CPAC is a particularly important event. I think it's just a good networking conference for Conservatism Inc., of which I am of no affiliation. Enough time in that cesspool. I have no interest in getting involved in their gross industry. So if you've made it this far, please do like this video to show that you support independent media, and hit that subscribe button. And I'll see you all either later today or tomorrow. I'm not sure if I'll do another video.